The Golden Age studio system was designed to keep performers dependent and disposable. Studios controlled contracts, salaries, and careers while accumulating fortunes from their stars' labor. Most performers, even legendary ones, died with little to show for decades of work. But a rebellious few golden-era stars refused to play by Hollywood's rigged rules. They recognized that fame wasn't wealth, it was leverage. These 15 performers from Hollywood's classic era built fortunes that would shock their contemporaries, transforming celebrity into business empires that lasted generations. Their methods were calculated, sometimes controversial, and always focused on one principle: ownership beats salary every time. 1. Gene Autry. The singing cowboy understood something that eluded most Western stars. The character on screen was a product that could be owned, licensed, and monetized indefinitely. While other cowboy actors collected weekly studio paychecks and watched their careers fade, Autry was building an empire that would generate wealth for generations. Autry's breakthrough came when he negotiated merchandising rights to his screen persona, an almost unheard-of arrangement when studios assumed total control over character licensing. By the late 1930s, Gene Autry comic books, clothing, toys, and branded products flooded the American market, with Autry receiving royalties on every item sold. He became the first entertainer to fully grasp personal branding decades before the concept had a name. His most audacious move came in 1961 when he purchased the expansion Los Angeles Angels baseball franchise for approximately $350,000. That franchise is now valued at approximately $2.2 billion. Simultaneously, Autry assembled Golden West Broadcasting, controlling radio and television stations across the western United States. He purchased hotels, accumulated ranch land, and invested in oil production. When Gene Autry died in 1998, his fortune exceeded $320 million. The Autry Museum of the American West stands as a permanent monument to his legacy, funded by a foundation he established. 2. Lucille Ball. In 1951, CBS demanded that Lucille Ball's new sitcom be broadcast live from New York. Ball refused. She and husband, Desi Arnaz, formed Desilu Productions, financing the pilot themselves and retaining complete ownership of I Love Lucy. They pioneered the three-camera filming technique and shot on film rather than broadcasting live, a technical choice with enormous financial implications. When I Love Lucy became America's most popular program, Ball and Arnaz owned every frame. In 1957, CBS purchased rebroadcast rights to 180 episodes for $4.3 million, the largest programming sale in television history at that point. Following her divorce from Arnaz in 1960, Ball bought his stake for $2.5 million, becoming the first woman to own and operate a major Hollywood production studio. Under her leadership, Desilu produced series for multiple networks. She greenlit Star Trek when other executives considered it too risky, and launched Mission: Impossible into a franchise that continues generating revenue today. When Ball sold Desilu to Gulf Plus Western in 1967, she received $17 million, roughly $155 million adjusted for inflation. The woman who spent years as a B-movie actress had transformed a network conflict into a business empire, proving definitively that ownership trumped salary in every possible calculation. 3. Bob Hope. For 6 decades, Bob Hope cultivated an image as America's comedian, famous for rapid-fire jokes and USO performances. What that public persona concealed was one of history's most aggressive real estate investment strategies. While audiences laughed, Hope was quietly assembling a land portfolio that would dwarf his entertainment earnings. Hope's approach was deceptively simple: purchase large parcels of undeveloped California land and wait. Beginning in the 1940s, he accumulated thousands of acres across the region. His most famous holding was a 2,400-acre parcel in the San Fernando Valley, purchased for approximately $600,000. As Los Angeles expanded, that land became surrounded by suburban development. Even more significant were Hope's desert holdings around Palm Springs, eventually totaling approximately 8,650 acres, a substantial percentage of the entire area's developable land. He purchased much of this property for less than $100 per acre, understanding that California's population growth would eventually make desert living desirable. While colleagues purchased expensive homes and luxury cars, Hope lived relatively modestly, pouring entertainment earnings into land. When he died in 2003 at age 100, estimates of his net worth ranged from $400 million to over $1 billion, making him potentially the wealthiest entertainer of his generation. 4. William Boyd. By the late 1940s, William Boyd's career as Hopalong Cassidy had seemingly ended. The Western genre was fading, his films were relegated to Saturday matinees, and industry observers considered him a relic. What Boyd did next was either brilliant or insane. He spent his entire life savings, approximately $350,000, to purchase rights to his old films and the character itself. Hollywood insiders considered it foolish desperation. The films had already completed their theatrical runs. What value could they retain? The answer arrived in 1949 when NBC began broadcasting Boyd's films on television. A new generation discovered Hopalong Cassidy, and the character exploded into a phenomenon. But unlike other Western stars, Boyd owned Hopalong Cassidy outright. The merchandising avalanche generated staggering revenue. At the phenomenon's peak in 1950, licensing revenue alone approached $800,000 annually. More than 2,400 companies manufactured Hopalong Cassidy products, and Boyd collected on everyone. Boyd's gamble transformed a worthless film library into a goldmine precisely because he owned it outright. He had recognized something his contemporaries missed. Instead of the character making the performer valuable, ownership of the character made the performer wealthy, regardless of whether he ever appeared on screen again. 5. Elizabeth Taylor. Elizabeth Taylor began her career as a child star in Golden Age Hollywood, appearing in National Velvet at age 12. She famously became the first actress to demand and receive $1 million for a single film, Cleopatra, in 1963. But that groundbreaking payday represents only a fraction of the fortune Taylor accumulated through business ventures extending her earning power far beyond the screen. The true foundation of Taylor's wealth emerged from her pioneering approach to celebrity fragrance licensing. When she launched White Diamonds perfume in 1991, Taylor negotiated unprecedented terms. Rather than accepting standard licensing fees, she secured substantial ownership stakes, paying her based on actual sales performance. White Diamonds became one of the most successful celebrity fragrances ever created, generating over $1.5 billion in cumulative revenue. Taylor's ownership position meant she earned tens of millions annually from a product requiring no additional work beyond occasional promotional appearances. Following White Diamond's success, Taylor expanded her fragrance empire with additional scents, each structured with similar ownership arrangements. By the 2000s, her fragrance business generated approximately $80 million yearly, more than most actresses earned during entire careers. She had discovered that fame, properly leveraged, could be monetized infinitely without physical demands. When Elizabeth Taylor died in 2011, her estate was valued between $600 million and $1 billion, with her jewelry collection alone fetching $156.8 million at auction. 6. Bing Crosby. While contemporaries viewed Bing Crosby primarily as a crooner and movie star, his actual business interests extended into technology, sports, and media in ways that made him arguably the prototype for modern celebrity entrepreneurs. During the Golden Age, Crosby ranked among Hollywood's biggest box office draws while quietly building an investment portfolio. Crosby's most prescient investment involved Ampex Corporation, which pioneered commercial magnetic tape recording. Crosby despised live radio constraints requiring identical shows for different time zones. He invested $50,000 in Ampex and became one of the first entertainers to broadcast using magnetic tape. The investment proved spectacularly successful as tape recording revolutionized broadcasting and music production. Simultaneously, Crosby expanded into sports ownership, acquiring a stake in the Pittsburgh Pirates in 1946. He invested in Texas oil wells, partnered in television production ventures, and acquired California real estate. His business interests were so diversified that entertainment income eventually represented only a portion of his total wealth. Crosby also understood intellectual property value before most performers recognized the concept. He retained ownership stakes in recordings and broadcasts, ensuring ongoing revenue from work completed decades earlier. This approach to residual income became a template that later generations would adopt. By his death in 1977, Crosby had demonstrated that celebrity could function as a platform for serious business ventures rather than merely a source of performance income. 7. Cary Grant. In 1936, Cary Grant made a decision Hollywood considered professional suicide. He walked away from the studio contract system at its peak. At a time when every major star was bound to long-term agreements, Grant declared independence, insisting on working film by film. Industry observers predicted career collapse. Instead, Grant became one of the highest-paid actors of his generation. The logic was straightforward. Under contract, studios paid fixed salaries regardless of how much films earned. By working independently, Grant could negotiate deals tying compensation to actual performance, capturing profit percentages rather than accepting predetermined amounts. Grant's masterstroke came with Operation Petticoat in 1959. Rather than accepting $750,000, Grant proposed an alternative: no upfront payment in exchange for 75% of profits. Studio executives readily agreed. The film became a massive success, and Grant's participation ultimately exceeded $3 million, 4 times his offered salary. Beyond film negotiations, Grant invested strategically in businesses benefiting from his social connections. His stake in Fabergé Perfume Company provided ongoing passive income. He accumulated ownership positions in film negatives, ensuring perpetual residual payments. Grant also understood expense management as wealth building. While colleagues purchased extravagant mansions, Grant lived modestly, allowing investments to compound. When he died in 1986, his estate exceeded $60 million. 8. Fred MacMurray. To millions of television viewers, Fred MacMurray was the wholesome patriarch of My Three Sons. But during Golden Age Hollywood, MacMurray had already established himself as a leading man in classics like Double Indemnity. Behind that versatile career operated one of Hollywood's shrewdest agricultural investors. MacMurray's strategy exploited a peculiarity of his television contract. He negotiated to film all scenes for each season in approximately 3 months, collecting $150,000 per episode while spending most of each year managing his real business, walnut ranching. Beginning in the 1950s, MacMurray systematically purchased California agricultural land, focusing on walnut cultivation. At his peak, he owned approximately 1,500 acres of productive farmland, including operations ranking among California's largest commercial walnut producers. These weren't vanity projects. They were serious agricultural businesses generating substantial annual income, independent of entertainment work. His lifestyle reflected Depression-era values. While Hollywood peers maintained costly appearances, MacMurray drove modest cars, avoided extravagant purchases, and reinvested entertainment earnings into productive assets. He understood that consumption destroyed wealth while ownership created it. When Fred MacMurray died in 1991, his estate exceeded $100 million, with agricultural holdings representing the majority. The actor, who embodied simple American values, had quietly become one of California's significant agricultural landowners. 9. Roy Rogers and Dale Evans. Roy Rogers and Dale Evans built their fortune by fighting a battle most Golden Age entertainers didn't realize was possible: ownership of their own identities. In an industry where studios controlled character licensing, this husband and wife team secured unprecedented rights to their names, likenesses, and personas. That negotiating victory generated wealth far exceeding their combined salaries. Their business model recognized that character licensing generated revenue indefinitely, while performance salaries ended when contracts expired. By securing image ownership, they transformed from employees into proprietors. Every licensed product bearing their faces required approval and paid royalties. At their peak, more than 2,400 different products featured Roy Rogers and Dale Evans branding. Lunchboxes, clothing, toys, books, and records flooded American stores throughout the 1950s. Unlike William Boyd, who purchased character rights after the fact, Rogers and Evans negotiated ownership from positions of strength. The couple expanded beyond licensing into active business ownership. Roy Rogers restaurants eventually grew to more than 600 locations, providing ongoing revenue independent of entertainment trends. Dale Evans managed many business ventures, handling negotiations and ensuring licensing agreements protected long-term interests. Their combined estate reached approximately $100 million, validating an approach prioritizing ownership over employment. They recognized that celebrity, properly protected, could generate perpetual income rather than temporary salary. 10. Howard Hughes. Howard Hughes was never primarily an entertainer, yet his film productions and relationships with Golden Age movie stars made him a Hollywood fixture. His story illustrates the maximum potential of using entertainment as a platform for building wealth in other sectors. Hughes inherited a fortune from Hughes Tool Company, which held patents on drill bits essential to oil extraction. His film productions, beginning with Hell's Angels in 1930, demonstrated artistic ambition. That film cost approximately $4 million, which Hughes personally financed. But film was never Hughes's primary interest. He built Hughes Aircraft Company into a defense contracting powerhouse, securing contracts worth hundreds of millions during World War II and the Cold War. He acquired Trans World Airlines, transforming a regional carrier into an international company. His aerospace investments positioned him at the forefront of industries dominating the 20th century's second half. Hughes's Hollywood presence served multiple purposes. Relationships with actresses, including Katharine Hepburn and Ava Gardner, generated publicity. His ownership of RKO Pictures from 1948 to 1955 gave him studio control, though erratic management damaged the company. Throughout, entertainment remained secondary to aerospace and aviation interests. When Hughes died in 1976, his net worth ranged between $1.5 billion and $2.5 billion, exceeding $10 billion in contemporary dollars. Walt Disney. Walt Disney transformed a struggling animation studio into an entertainment empire through relentless focus on ownership and brand control. Unlike Golden Age performers who sold their services, Disney retained ownership of characters, stories, and intellectual property that would generate revenue for generations. Disney's breakthrough came with Mickey Mouse in 1928, but his genius lay in maintaining complete ownership of the character. When Mickey became a cultural phenomenon, Disney controlled all licensing, a strategy that generated millions from merchandise while competitors' characters enriched other companies. The company's expansion into theme parks represented Disney's most audacious bet. Disneyland, opening in 1955, required enormous capital investment and seemed financially reckless to industry observers. But Disney understood that physical destinations created ongoing revenue streams independent of film success. The parks became profit engines generating billions annually. Disney also pioneered television as a promotional platform. His weekly television program essentially provided free advertising for theatrical releases and theme parks while generating its own revenue, a synergy model that became standard practice decades later. Beyond business strategy, Disney accumulated personal real estate holdings throughout California and maintained ownership stakes in company ventures. When Walt Disney died in 1966, his estate was valued at approximately $100 million. The company he built, maintaining his ownership philosophy, became worth hundreds of billions. 12. Mary Pickford. Mary Pickford earned the title Queen of the Movies during the silent era, but her lasting legacy came from business decisions that made her one of Hollywood's wealthiest founders. In 1919, Pickford joined Charlie Chaplin, Douglas Fairbanks, and D.W. Griffith to form United Artists, creating a distribution company owned by the artists themselves. The formation of United Artists represented a revolutionary rejection of studio control. Rather than accepting salaries from existing studios, these performers would distribute their own films and retain profits. Industry establishment reacted with fury. One executive reportedly said, "The inmates are taking over the asylum." Pickford's business acumen extended beyond United Artists. She negotiated contracts paying her percentages of film grosses rather than flat fees, earning amounts that shocked contemporaries. At her peak, she earned approximately $350,000 annually, equivalent to millions today, plus profit participation. She invested earnings strategically in real estate, including the legendary Pickfair estate that became Hollywood's social center. Pickford also maintained ownership stakes in film negatives, ensuring ongoing revenue from her silent classics. When sound films emerged and her career faded, Pickford's wealth remained secure because it was built on ownership rather than salary. When she died in 1979, her estate was valued at approximately $50 million, a fortune accumulated primarily during the silent era. Charlie Chaplin. Charlie Chaplin combined artistic genius with business sophistication that made him one of cinema's wealthiest pioneers. Like Mary Pickford, Chaplin co-founded United Artists in 1919, but his wealth building extended far beyond that single venture. Chaplin's most crucial decision was maintaining complete ownership of his films. Unlike contemporaries who sold their work to studios, Chaplin retained negatives, distribution rights, and character ownership. The tramp character, one of cinema's most recognizable figures, belonged entirely to Chaplin, generating licensing revenue for decades. His contract negotiations were legendary. By 1917, Chaplin earned over $1 million annually, making him the highest-paid performer in the world. But rather than spending lavishly, Chaplin invested in production facilities, real estate, and his own film library. His production studio gave him complete creative and financial control. Chaplin's perfectionism sometimes resulted in expensive productions, but ownership meant profits flowed to him rather than studio shareholders. Films like City Lights and Modern Times generated revenue for decades through re-releases and eventually television licensing. Political controversy forced Chaplin to leave America in 1952, but his wealth followed him. He maintained ownership of his film library from Switzerland, licensing films internationally. When Charlie Chaplin died in 1977, his estate was valued at approximately $100 million, built almost entirely on ownership of work he created decades earlier. 14. James Stewart. James Stewart's folksy screen persona concealed one of Golden Age Hollywood's shrewdest negotiators. Stewart pioneered profit participation deals that transformed how actors were compensated, proving that back-end percentages could generate far more wealth than upfront salaries. Stewart's landmark deal came with Winchester 73 in 1950. Rather than accepting a salary, Stewart negotiated for a percentage of profits, reportedly the first major profit participation deal in Hollywood history. The film's success made Stewart far more money than any salary would have provided and established a template that transformed industry compensation. Following Winchester 73's success, Stewart negotiated similar deals for subsequent films. His participation in films like Rear Window, Vertigo, and The Man Who Shot Liberty Valance generated ongoing revenue as these classics were re-released and eventually sold to television. Beyond film negotiations, Stewart invested conservatively in real estate and securities. His lifestyle remained modest compared to Hollywood peers. He famously drove the same car for years and avoided conspicuous consumption. This frugality allowed investment income to compound rather than depleting earnings through expenses. Stewart also served in the Air Force, eventually reaching brigadier general rank in the reserves. His military career provided pension income and connections useful for investment opportunities. When James Stewart died in 1997, his estate was valued at approximately $30 million. Built primarily through profit participation and conservative investment rather than salary accumulation. John Wayne. John Wayne parlayed his status as Golden Age Hollywood's most popular movie star into a diversified business portfolio, generating wealth far beyond his substantial film earnings. While his screen image emphasized rugged individualism, Wayne's financial approach emphasized strategic investment and ownership. Wayne's production company, Batjack Productions, gave him ownership stakes in his own films rather than merely collecting salary. Founded in 1952, Batjack produced numerous Wayne vehicles, with profits flowing to Wayne rather than studio shareholders. This ownership position proved particularly valuable as films were licensed to television and eventually home video. Beyond film production, Wayne invested in real estate throughout the American Southwest, oil and gas ventures in Texas, and a shrimp business in Panama. His investments in Arizona cotton farmland proved particularly profitable as agricultural values appreciated. Wayne also understood the value of his own image. He carefully controlled licensing of his name and likeness, ensuring that merchandise featuring his image required approval and royalty payments. This brand protection generated ongoing passive income throughout his career. His lifestyle was comfortable but not extravagant by Hollywood standards. Wayne reinvested film earnings rather than consuming them through excessive spending, allowing his portfolio to grow consistently over decades. When John Wayne died in 1979, his estate was valued at approximately $50 million. His heirs continue managing his image rights, generating ongoing revenue from a persona that remains commercially valuable decades after his death. These 15 Golden Era stars shared one crucial insight. Fame wasn't the reward, it was leverage. While hundreds of equally talented contemporaries accepted studio salaries and died with little to show for legendary careers, these rebels demanded ownership, invested strategically, and built empires lasting generations. Their combined fortunes exceeded several $billion, accumulated not through higher salaries but through understanding that celebrity provided opportunities unavailable to ordinary investors. They weren't better performers than those who struggled financially. They were simply more suspicious of an industry designed to exploit their talents while keeping them dependent.